There are three main sign languages that are spoken here in the United States. The first is American Sign Language, which is what the deaf community speaks and is what I speak. The next two are Signed Exact English and Pidgin Signed English. So I'm going to go through each one and then I'll give you an example so you can see the differences visually. They all have their pros and cons. So the first one is American Sign Language. It uses the least amount of words and it gets to the point, but it has its own syntax. That's what makes it its own language. It's not just a signed version of English, so because it has its own sentence structure, it can be more difficult to learn. Then you have Signed Exact English. This is a lot easier to learn if you're a native English speaker since it keeps that English sentence structure, but it uses the American Sign Language signs. So it can also be a little wordy though, because you have to add in all the words like the, like, a, etc. And you have to sign the prefix and suffix of each word because you are signing exactly what you would say in English. This also gets more difficult because for simple signs like beautiful, so that's the sign for beautiful and pretty in sign language. But if you want to do it in Signed Exact English, you have to denote the difference. So because of that, you now have to sign it with the first letter of the word. So for pretty, you would have to take the P and do it. For beautiful, the B. So it just takes a little extra time to figure out which one you want to say when they mean essentially the same thing. But it's used a lot more by people that are learning sign language at a later date, not early on in life, because it is easier. Then you get to Pidgin Sign English, which is a combination of the two. It's used a lot by hearing parents when they're talking to deaf children, or also by interpreters. Because when you're interpreting, you want to be able to sign as quickly as possible so that the conversation keeps moving. So if you have to wait until the sentence ends to then be able to translate it into sign and also into the new syntax, so it's grammatically correct in sign language, it takes longer than if you can sign as they're going through the sentence. So those are some of the pros and cons of each one. So I'm going to show you an example of a sentence using all three formats. So the sentence is, how are you doing? In American Sign Language, that would be this. How you. In Signed Exact English, it would be this. How are you doing? So it's a lot easier to talk when you're doing that because you're signing each word, so you can sign as you speak. That's one of the main benefits. It's one of the reasons I don't speak a lot while I'm signing. I'll say what I'm going to sign prior, and then if I'm breaking it down, I might tell you what the signs are. But it gets confusing if I'm trying to say, how are you doing, while just doing this, because the signs are way quicker than the English sentences. And then for PSE, the way you would say it is, how are you do? So it's similar to the SEE, but one of the differences you might not notice is with SEE, you have to say are like this, and then there's a different one for am and is. With PSE, it's all the same. It's just that. So that makes it a little simpler to remember, and because you also have to you have to say do, but you don't have to add the ing like you do with SEE. So it's quicker, but neither SEE or PSE are as quick as how are you doing in sign language, American Sign Language. So these are just a few of the differences, and it shows why you may see different people sign in different formats because they might have learned it they might have learned a different sign language than you. It's pretty easy to understand people that are speaking in one of the other two types, but it's not as easy to try and speak in a different type. So if I'm speaking American Sign Language, I can understand you if you're speaking Signed Exact English, but I might not be able to respond in Signed Exact English just because I'm not used to adding all those extra words.